Good evening, I'm Eastern PA Weather Authority meteorologist Bobby Martich with a special update on Hurricane Hermine. Hermine has become a hurricane today, Category 1 hurricane, and has gotten a lot better organized as we thought was going to happen right before it reached the Florida coastline. And that's in large part to the amount of shear that when this area has virtually disappeared. It's actually being accelerated to the northeast. Once it hits land here, it's going to continue off. You can see a tremendous outflow with this. And you can see that what looks to be an eye wall forming right here in the middle. And I will say we're probably pretty lucky that this thing is going to be hitting land soon, because if it wasn't, this thing is really, really deepening quickly. And it would not surprise me at all before making landfall somewhere between right here and right here that it reaches Category 2 strength. You can see the last couple of frames on the satellite, the top, the cold convection tops are really firing around this eye wall. So there's some pretty strong winds right around that eye center. But there's still some pretty good winds that are way out in front of it in these feeder bands. Moving into the western half or western coastline of Florida here, some wind gusts over 50 miles per hour way away from the center. So this is still a pretty large and potent system, and it's going to make landfall within a few hours. Actually, if it hits here, it's going to be within a 4 or 5 hours by midnight, before midnight. If it hits further east, it could be a little just after midnight, depending on what this does. These sometimes wobble a little bit, so it's uncertain if it's going more northerly here or more northeast. I think my landfall point's going to be right in the middle here somewhere, and that's probably a safe bet. Heading over to radar now, we finally have the radar in range, and we can see the long-range radar showing that convection firing right around the center, and a well-defined eye in the middle, and that is going to continue off to the northeast, and again make landfall somewhere in the vicinity of Apalachicola over here. But like I said, the landfall point's not really necessary to nail down, because you're going to have winds in and around this eye that's going to be hurricane force and pretty strong. So as this moves off to the northeast, it's going to move over Florida and then eventually into southern Georgia. And the National Hurricane Center track officially takes that from that landfall point over southern Georgia, over South Carolina and North Carolina, brings it to a point right about here. Now the question after this point becomes, where does it go? Because some of the models are bringing this a little bit closer on the western side of this track, and which will put it right about here. Now the National Hurricane Center has adjusted this slightly to the northwest, but you see they're getting down. It's coming northwest, and it doesn't appear to be, because you look at this. This is their cone of uncertainty that's being narrowed now, so it's not as wide as it was before. So before, we look at it yesterday, you had much of eastern Pennsylvania in this cone also, but see, as time goes on, the cone narrows because you don't have as much uncertainty downstream. So even though it looks like, oh well, now eastern PA is not in it, that's because this is the direct track. The direct shot track of the center is not in it, but the impacts could be felt far away from the center, especially since we're expecting this to transition, and I'm going to get this right today, from a warm core hurricane, maintaining strength. It's going to lose a little bit, but it's going to maintain strength for the most part as it transitions somewhere probably over North Carolina here into a cold core system or post-tropical low. Now you still see all along the beach points up here from North Carolina, Virginia border all the way up to about Sandy Hook, New Jersey here. They have tropical storm watches up, and that's even after it's post-tropical, because you're still, even though it's still not technically a tropical storm, it's still producing tropical storm-like impacts right along these areas here. And of course, the areas down here in blue are tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings down here, where nearest the point of landfall. So we're expecting this to impact the area this weekend, and we're going to start to feel those effects Saturday night. This is going to be from right along the southern points here. We're going to get into it Saturday night already, and then the majority of the area will get into it on Sunday, I should say. And we're going to get into the model guidance now, because the model guidance is pretty narrowed down now. This is the GFS showing the landfall point. Now, obviously, it's going to be stronger. This is showing 998. You don't ever want to use the strength of the GFS here, because it's usually off. It's a lower resolution model, so sometimes it's a little bit off on the pressure here. And as I can tell you, it's already at least 10 or more millibars below that at landfall. You can see it moves up to the northeast, tracks pretty much where the National Hurricane Center has it going, over eastern North Carolina, and then kind of gets out here in over the ocean. This has already transitioned now to a nor'easter. You can see at this point, I'm going to give you a zoomed in image of this too, so don't worry about that. The impacts are going to be felt greatest here along the shore points, where with heavy rain and wind, you're also getting a pretty strong fetch off the ocean and a pretty tight pressure gradient. And that's because you have this high pressure that's sitting over the top right here. So this blocks it from going out. You have a very strong area of low pressure right here. So you have channeling winds in between here. So you're going to have wind gusts that are pretty strong. They're going to be gusting 40, 50, maybe even 60 miles per hour along the coast here. So that's going to lead to some coastal beach flooding, tidal flooding, waves over 10 feet. In some areas down here by Ocean City, Maryland, could be up to 14 feet. And we could have some surge, especially the back bays and channels here, of 1 to 3 feet. And then right along the immediate shore points, you could have rain, heavy rain, 3 to 5 inches are possible in those areas closest to the storm. But as you get further west, and this is getting wrapped up, you're really going to diminish the risk here because or the impacts. Now you're going to have the wind. The wind's going to come pretty far inland and not that strong because it's obviously friction over land will keep it from being that strong as it is on the shore. But you're still going to get some breezing conditions here on Sunday. Now watch what this system does. I'm going to go a little bit forward here. And the storm actually pulls up and it runs into this high. It can't go anywhere. The high is actually pulling it back westward a little bit. So this is an interesting development with that too. If it does in fact do that, you're going to get some heavy rain and wind coming back further west a little bit. Now, this is looking at Sunday morning. So areas in eastern Pennsylvania, especially southeast PA, down by the Philadelphia area, could get into that heavy rain and wind. A lot of people are asking me about northeast PA. Do you expect rain in northeast PA? Not really. Some, but not really. Here's that thrust of precipitation westward. And again, this is mostly east central PA, probably between Allentown and Philadelphia back to Lancaster. So most of the precipitation stays southeast. And this is just one model run here. This is not taken for granted here, but then as we get to Sunday evening, you can see some light rain, some of these feeder bands making their way around the system, and you could get into northeastern PA as well, but this will be generally light at this point. I'm not expecting too much up in the Poconos, and most of it holds off until at least Sunday afternoon up there. So up in these areas here, except for the shore points are really going to get clobbered, as most tropical systems will do. It's really an effect of the coast here. But as we get to the GFS ensembles, this is running the GFS an additional 20 times and blending this mean together, and we have basically a consensus that is going to be right here in the Delmarva region with this low pressure. That's what this is telling me. Of course, you have the ridge building over the top and high pressure that's going to be setting up kind of somewhere up here as this thing gets going. It's going to be channeling these winds in here off the coastline. So just anywhere in the shore points is not a good weekend to be down there. If you did see our beach forecast we updated, if you haven't seen our beach forecast we updated today, it gives an explicit detail of what to expect at the South Jersey beaches and then also in the Delaware beaches down to Ocean City, Maryland. But there's some pretty good impacts here right along the coastline, and especially with waves. Waves are going to be pretty high along the coastline. Here's the European model. Again, I have to show you the 24-hour public increments because of copyright restrictions, but this is what we're looking at landfall 986. That's a lot closer to what landfall will be. And as you move forward from this point, this is 24 hours later, moves over to eastern North Carolina, kind of like the GFS has it, and then it moves up to a position into the offshore here, but this is just battering the coastline here. But again, this is Sunday morning, so even further northwest up here in parts of western portions of southeast PA, east central PA, and northeast PA, you're probably not dealing with anything yet. You're definitely going to be cloudy and breezy, but it looks like you're going to have some bands of rain that are going to come in the afternoon as this thing starts retrograding a little bit to the west, and that's not a total guarantee it does that. It might just do one of these little loop deals and then come back out. But you will have some impacts with those feeder bands wrapping around the system. So I'm not going to say it's going to be a rain-free event for you in any location. So I do expect at least some light rain out of this and some breezy conditions. But your biggest impacts obviously are going to be right on the shore points, and that's the area you want to avoid. And now here's a look at the 24 hours later. This is now early Tuesday, and this thing's still sitting here. Now the impacts along the coast are lessening as far as rain and wind, but at the same time, you still have an onshore flow, and you still have some tidal flooding and coastal flooding going on. It's still going to be breezy through Tuesday, and I think Wednesday it finally starts to slacken off, and the system starts to pull away. So some uncertainty about how fast that does that. Once this ridge relaxes, and this one builds, this ridge building here is going to get it really hot again next week. By the time we get to midweek, that's another thing. We're going to have temperatures go challenging the 90-degree mark by the time we get to Wednesday. So we'll have to take a look at that. Now, finally, I want to get into the zoomed-in image of the GFS. Now, this is showing a little bit more of what the impacts that you can expect for this area. Now, we're just going to take this one image at a time. This is looking at late Saturday, so you can see Later in the day Saturday, we're also just increasing clouds here on Saturday. But right along the shore points, you're getting pounded here from Ocean City, Maryland, all the way up to about Toms River, New Jersey, and a little bit further inland. Again, very high winds and heavy rain, and that coastal flooding that's going to be taking place will be a reality. This is where we expect the tropical storm force conditions, and mainly starting Saturday night. You can see that here, some very heavy rain, high winds, and surf. These are Saturday night into Sunday morning are probably going to be your most hellacious time, I should say. It's not going to be too pretty. Here's a look at early Sunday morning, pretty much the same deal. But you can see rain just now getting back to just northwest of I-95. This is just light rain at this point for folks far to the west. But you see most of New Jersey and Delaware is pretty much inundated in heavy rain. And then some of that will swing back westward, and that's shown here. So I do think people have been asking me about places like Harrisburg. Harrisburg, I think you're pretty much out of it. You're be unlikely to see anything there. Up here in northeastern PA, up across the Poconos, maybe some light rain later Sunday, but it's not looking like a big deal there. Our concern area, the areas we sent alerts to are right here in these areas. We sent our My Pocket Meteorologist alerts all to these areas right here, and nowhere northwest of that, just because we don't think the impacts are going to be that far great for anyone further inland and not worthy of an alert anyway. And then we go into here's Sunday evening. You can see some of that light rain moving, working its way through. But this system's starting to wrap up here. You see it starts drying out on the west side, and the system will start to pull east, and then finally pull out of here at some point on Monday. Monday, I expect the conditions to improve dramatically. Might start off a little sluggish at the shore points, but the conditions improve as this system starts to pull away to the east. So that's what we're looking at right now. Again, I'm going to just draw this for you because we have, since I have these counties clear, we have sent alerts to all these counties here that I'm circling. These are all the alert counties that we have sent My Pocket Meteorologist alerts for significant impacts from this system. If you get west of anything in this, I want to break this into two different categories here. Anything west in this area here is the highest concern for coastal flooding, high winds and rain, and the heavy rain. Anything northwest of there, not quite. You can probably cut those in half at least. Even this area, you can still get winds 15 to 25, a gust up to 40. Down here, where we are having some gusts up to 60 possible, and the worst part of that would be late Saturday night into at least the first half of Sunday, maybe longer than that. But further inland, you're just talking about maybe an inch or so of rain, locally higher amounts in these areas. This area could be anywhere from 3 to 5 inches locally. So just be on the lookout for that. That's what we're looking at right now. This is the latest update with the latest information we have, and we'll try to do an update again tomorrow morning. I'm Eastern PA Weather Authority meteorologist Bobby Martrich. Have a great evening.